Admiral Kethavara stood on the bridge of his flagship, watching the blue planet grow larger on the main screen. His forearms moved gracefully across the control panels as he studied the data flowing in from his scout ships. Earth, they called it. A small world orbiting a yellow star, covered mostly in water and primitive life forms. The Admiral's scaled skin shifted from deep purple to a satisfied green. This would be easy. Too easy, perhaps. His crew had been hoping for a real challenge after their last 3 conquests. But the readings from this world showed nothing but disappointment. "Status report," Kethavara commanded, his voice carrying the authority of someone who had conquered 17 worlds for the Zephyrian hegemony. Sub-Commander Thal, a thin creature with 6 eyes, turned from his station. "Sir, the inhabitants call themselves humans. Our scans confirm they are still using chemical rockets for space travel. No energy weapons detected. No faster-than-light capability. They barely qualify as a Class 3 civilization." Kethavara's mandibles clicked in amusement. Chemical rockets. He remembered when his own people had used such crude technology, back when they were still confined to their homeworld thousands of years ago. These humans were like children playing with fire sticks. "Population?" the Admiral asked. "Approximately 8 billion spread across the main land masses. They appear to be divided into numerous competing nations. No unified planetary government detected. Even better, divided species were always easier to conquer. The Admiral had seen it countless times before. The locals would argue among themselves about surrender terms while his fleet positioned for orbital bombardment. Half of them would probably try to negotiate separate peace deals. Weapons assessment? Thal consulted his readings. Primitive kinetic weapons, chemical explosives, and crude atomic devices. Nothing that can penetrate our shields or reach our ships at combat altitude. Estimated time for total conquest: 6 to 8 planetary rotations. The bridge crew exchanged glances. 8 days would be a record. Their shortest previous conquest had taken 3 weeks, and that was against a species that had already been softened up by civil war. Kethavara studied the tactical display showing his fleet's position. 3 heavy cruisers, each 5 kilometers long and bristling with plasma cannons. The ships could level continents if needed, though he preferred to keep the infrastructure intact for resource extraction. Destroyed cities produce no wealth for the hegemony. "Sir," called Navigator Vess from her station, "long-range sensors are detecting unusual activity in the outer system. Large construction signatures near the 4th planet's moons." The Admiral's attention sharpened. "Show me." The main screen switched to display Jupiter, its massive bulk surrounded by the dance of its many moons. Scattered across the orbital space were energy signatures that didn't match anything in their databases of primitive technology. Analysis? Thal worked his instruments frantically. The signatures are significant. Whatever they're building out there is big, very big. But the energy patterns don't make sense for this level of civilization. Kethavara studied the readings. The construction zones showed industrial activity on a massive scale, but the technology seemed inconsistent. Parts of it looked almost advanced, while other sections appeared crude and primitive. Probably some kind of mining operation, he decided finally. Primitive species often strip their outer planets for resources once they discover space travel. It explains the size but not the sophistication. The crew seemed to accept this explanation. It made sense. Humans had probably found some rare minerals on those distant moons and were building enormous refineries to extract them. Crude but effective, like everything else about this species. "Maintain course," Kethavara ordered. "Begin standard conquest protocol. I want a full tactical assessment of their military capabilities and population centers. We'll give them the usual demonstration of our superiority, accept their surrender, and be done with this before the next supply convoy arrives." As his ship continued its approach to Earth, the Admiral allowed himself a moment of satisfaction. This would be profitable. The planet's abundant water alone would cover the cost of the expedition, and the rare minerals they'd detected would provide a nice bonus. The humans themselves might even be useful as a labor force, though they looked rather fragile. The bridge communications officer looked up from her station. "Sir, should we attempt to contact their leadership?" Kethavara considered this. Standard protocol called for contact with primitive species before conquest, but mostly for form's sake. The hegemony liked to maintain the pretense of civilized behavior, even when dealing with savages. Not yet. Let them sweat a bit first. Fear makes the surrender negotiations go much faster. His fleet continued its steady approach, following the same pattern they had used on dozens of worlds. Stay just outside their detection range while gathering intelligence. Move to attack position. Demand surrender with a show of force. Accept submission and begin resource extraction. The Admiral's scaled features twisted into what other species might recognize as a smile. In 3 days, Earth would know the power of the Zephyrian hegemony. Their little planet would become another jewel in the vast empire that stretched across the galaxy. He turned to study his crew, noting their relaxed postures and casual conversations. They too could sense how easy this conquest would be. No desperate last stands, no surprising tactical innovations, no heroes emerging to rally the defenders, just another primitive world adding its resources to the greater glory of the hegemony. Sub-Commander Thal, he called. Yes, sir? Begin recording everything. Command will want a full documentary of this conquest for the training archives. New officers can study it to learn proper technique against inferior opponents. Thal's expression brightened. Being featured in official training materials would look excellent in his service record. As Earth grew larger in the view screen, Admiral Kathavara began mentally composing his victory report. The conquest of Earth would be swift, profitable, and textbook perfect. Another successful demonstration of Zephyrian superiority over the primitive species that infested the galaxy. He had no way of knowing that far below, in hidden bunkers scattered across the world he was about to attack, other beings were also making final preparations. These humans had been watching and waiting for 50 years. They had studied every Zephyrian ship, analyzed every tactical pattern, and prepared surprises that would shatter every assumption about primitive Earth. The Admiral's casual confidence would have disturbed him greatly if he had known that his every move was being tracked by sensors more sophisticated than anything in his databases, that his ship's communications were being monitored and decoded in real time, that his standard tactics had already been war-gamed thousands of times by strategists who had studied his species' weaknesses with obsessive care. But Kathavara knew none of this. He saw only another easy conquest ahead, another primitive world to add to his collection. The readings from the outer system continued to puzzle his sensors, but they seemed unimportant compared to the defenseless planet before him. Soon, he would learn just how wrong his assumptions could be. Dr. Sarah Chen stood in the observation deck of the UES Leviathan, watching Jupiter's red spot churn in the distance. The massive planet had hidden humanity's greatest secret for 5 decades, and now that secret was about to be tested against impossible odds. 50 years ago, she had been just another graduate student studying astrophysics. That changed the day the first alien probe entered the solar system. While the world's governments debated whether to announce first contact, a small group of scientists and military leaders made a different choice. They decided to prepare for war. Project Bulwark began in absolute secrecy. The crashed probe recovered from Mars gave them their first glimpse of alien technology. The energy systems were centuries ahead of human science, but the computer systems were surprisingly vulnerable to Earth's electronic warfare techniques. It seemed the aliens had grown comfortable with their technological superiority. Sarah remembered the early days, working 18-hour shifts in underground laboratories, trying to understand physics that challenged everything humans thought they knew. The breakthrough came when Dr. Martinez figured out how to reverse engineer the alien shield generators. They couldn't match the original efficiency, but human engineering could make them bigger, tougher, and more resilient. Captain, called Lieutenant Rodriguez from the communication station. All stations report ready. The Titan and Goliath are in position behind the lunar shadow. Sarah nodded, though her attention remained focused on the alien fleet approaching Earth. 3 ships, just as the projections had predicted. The Zephyrians always used the same tactics, the same formations, the same overconfident assumptions. 50 years of intercepted communications had taught humanity everything about their enemies. How long until they reach bombardment range? Sarah asked. 14 hours, 17 minutes at current velocity. 14 hours. Sarah thought about all the years of preparation that had led to this moment. The secret lunar bases where they had tested prototype weapons. The asteroid mining operations that had provided raw materials for the Behemoth-Class ships. The careful deception that made Earth appear helpless while humanity built the most advanced warships in their part of the galaxy. The Leviathan stretched 15 kilometers from bow to stern, its hull bristling with weapon systems that combined human innovation with stolen alien technology. railguns that could accelerate projectiles to 20% of light speed, nuclear torpedoes with yields measured in hundreds of megatons, electronic warfare suites designed to jam, confuse, and overwhelm any computer system. But the ship's greatest advantage wasn't its weapons. It was the crew. "Commander Park, what's the status on the weapon systems?" Sarah called out. The weapons officer, a former South Korean naval captain, looked up from his displays. "All railgun batteries charged and ready. Nuclear torpedo tubes loaded. Point defense systems online. We've got enough firepower to crack a moon." Sarah smiled grimly. The aliens would expect humans to fight like humans had always fought, with courage but limited imagination. They would never expect the tactical innovations that humanity had developed specifically to counter Zephyrian combat doctrine. She walked to the tactical display showing the solar system. Red dots marked the approaching enemy fleet. Green dots showed the 3 Behemoth-class ships hidden behind Luna. Blue dots indicated the network of automated defense platforms scattered throughout near-Earth space, disguised as communications satellites and research stations. "Engineering, how are our systems holding up?" Chief Engineer Thompson's voice crackled over the intercom from deep within the ship's bowels. "Alien shield generators are running at optimal efficiency. The fusion reactors are performing better than expected. Honestly, Captain, I think we've improved on their original design." That was the thing about human engineering. Where aliens built elegant, efficient systems, humans built robust, adaptable ones. The Leviathan's shields might consume more power than their alien counterparts, but they could also take punishment that would overwhelm more sophisticated designs. Sarah thought about the intelligence reports that had shaped their strategy. The Zephyrian hegemony controlled hundreds of worlds, but they had grown lazy. Their conquests followed the same pattern every time. Arrive in force, demonstrate superiority, accept surrender, establish control. It had worked so well for so long that they had stopped preparing for real resistance. "Captain," called the sensor operator, "I'm picking up alien communications. They're conducting standard reconnaissance sweeps. Can we decode them?" "Yes, ma'am." "They're discussing our primitive space infrastructure and estimating conquest time at 6 to 8 days. The bridge crew exchanged glances. 6 to 8 days. The aliens had no idea what was waiting for them. Sarah remembered the debates in those early planning sessions. Some had argued for revealing humanity's capabilities immediately, hoping to deter an invasion. Others wanted to strike first, taking the war to alien space before they could organize a response. But the final strategy had been more subtle. Let the aliens come. Let them commit to their attack. Let them get close enough that retreat would be impossible, then show them exactly how wrong their assumptions could be. "Navigator, confirm our position relative to the enemy fleet. We're maintaining station behind Luna's gravitational shadow. Their sensors can't detect us at this range." The Leviathan and her sister ships had been built in the asteroid belt, far from Earth's populated areas. The construction had taken decades, with materials and components shipped out in secret cargo runs disguised as routine mining operations. Even now, most of Earth's population had no idea that their planet was about to become a battlefield. Sarah checked the chronometer. In less than 12 hours, the first shots would be fired. The alien fleet would arrive expecting easy conquest and find instead the most sophisticated trap in human history. "All stations, this is the captain," she announced over the ship's intercom. "In a few hours, we're going to face an enemy that has conquered hundreds of worlds. They think they know everything about warfare. They think they know everything about us. They're about to learn how wrong they are." She paused, thinking about the weight of responsibility on her shoulders. 3 ships against a galactic empire. It should have been hopeless. "We're not just fighting for Earth," she continued. "We're fighting for every species the hegemony has enslaved. We're fighting to prove that no one has the right to conquer others just because they have superior technology. And we're fighting to show the galaxy that humans don't give up." The bridge crew straightened at their stations. These weren't just military officers following orders. They were volunteers who had trained their entire careers for this moment. Engineers who had spent decades perfecting weapon systems. Tacticians who had studied every aspect of Zephyrian warfare. "Remember your training," Sarah said. "Trust your equipment. Watch each other's backs. And show these aliens what happens when they underestimate Earth." As the alien fleet continued its approach, completely unaware of the weapons aimed at them from the darkness, Sarah felt a cold satisfaction settle over her. For 50 years, humanity had lived in secret fear of this day. Now finally they were ready. The Zephyrians were about to learn that some primitives bite back. Admiral Kethvara watched with satisfaction as his fleet moved into position above Earth. The planet looked even more vulnerable up close, its cities glowing like scattered jewels against the darkness. No orbital defenses, no military installations that could threaten his ships. Just another primitive world waiting to be claimed. Communications. Open a channel to the planet, he ordered. The image of Earth appeared on his view screen, replaced moments later by static and confused voices speaking in dozens of different languages. The humans were trying to respond, but they couldn't even agree on who should talk first. Typical for a divided species. "Attention, inhabitants of Earth," Kethvara began, his words automatically translated into the local languages. "I am Admiral Kethvara of the Zephyrian hegemony. Your world has been selected for incorporation into our empire. You have one rotation of your planet to surrender unconditionally. Resistance will result in the destruction of your major population centers." The response was everything he expected. Panicked transmissions flooded the airwaves as world leaders tried to coordinate some kind of response. Military units scrambled to battle stations. Citizens fled from the cities in hopeless masses. "Sir," reported Subcommander Thal, "we're detecting launch signatures from multiple locations on the surface. They appear to be launching missiles." Kethvara's mandibles clicked with amusement. On screen, the tactical display showed dozens of primitive rockets rising from Earth's surface, trailing fire and smoke as they climbed toward the alien fleet. Chemical propulsion exactly as expected. The missiles would take hours to reach combat altitude if they could reach it at all. Their largest weapons appear to be atomic devices, Thal continued. Crude fusion bombs with yields in the tens of megatons. The Admiral almost felt sorry for them. Tens of megatons. His ship's shields could absorb teratons of energy without fluctuating. These humans were attacking a battleship with firecrackers. Let them exhaust their missile reserves, he decided. It will make the surrender negotiations easier when they realize how hopeless their situation is. The first wave of human missiles reached the Zephyrian fleet 3 hours later. Point defense systems swatted them from space like insects, their nuclear warheads producing brief flashes of light that barely registered on the alien sensors. The second wave met the same fate, then the third. "They're running out of missiles," Thal reported. "Surface installations are going silent. I think they're finally understanding their situation." Kethvara nodded with satisfaction. The pattern was always the same. First came the desperate resistance, then the slow realization of hopelessness. Finally, the requests for surrender terms. This conquest was proceeding exactly according to schedule. "Move us into bombardment position," he ordered. "Prepare to target their largest city as a demonstration. One plasma burst should be enough to convince them." His flagship and escorts began their descent toward the planet, their hulls gleaming in Earth's sunlight. The Admiral enjoyed this part of conquest, the moment when primitives finally understood the vast gulf between their technology and true civilization. That was when the proximity alarms began screaming. "Contact," shouted the sensor operator. Multiple massive signatures emerging from behind the lunar body. The main screen flickered, then displayed an image that made Kethvara's scaled skin shift to the pale blue of shock. 3 enormous shapes were moving out from behind Earth's moon, their hulls dark against the starfield. They were huge, bigger than anything in his fleet, bigger than most space stations. "Impossible," he whispered. The lead ship was a monster of metal and composites, bristling with weapon ports and sensor arrays. Its hull bore markings in the human script, UES Leviathan. The other 2 ships flanked it in perfect formation, their weapons already powering up with energy signatures that his instruments couldn't properly classify. "How did we miss them?" Kethvara demanded. "Sir, they were using the moon's gravitational field to mask their signatures. Our sensors couldn't detect them from this angle." The Admiral's mind raced. These ships were impossible. The humans were primitives. They used chemical rockets and fought with atomic weapons. They couldn't have built vessels like these without decades of advanced technology development. "Get me a tactical analysis," he snapped. Thal worked frantically at his station. "Sir, each ship appears to be approximately 15 kilometers in length. They're showing energy shield signatures. Somehow they have barrier technology. Weapon systems are unknown. I'm reading power levels that shouldn't be possible for their civilization level." A new voice filled the bridge, speaking calmly in accented but clear Zephyrian. "Attention, Zephyrian fleet. This is Captain Sarah Chen of the United Earthship Leviathan. You are trespassing in Sol System territory. Withdraw immediately or face the consequences. Admiral Kethvara felt his authority challenged for the first time in decades. A primitive human was giving him orders. The absurdity of it made his combat instincts flare. "This is Admiral Kethvara," he responded, his voice carrying all the authority of the hegemony. "You will stand down immediately. Your pathetic vessels cannot match the power of true military technology." The human's response was immediate and chilling. "Admiral, you have 30 seconds to begin retreat maneuvers. After that, we will consider you a hostile force." The sheer audacity of it was breathtaking. 3 human ships facing 3 Zephyrian cruisers, and the primitive was issuing ultimatums. Kethvara's crew looked to him expectantly. This insult to hegemony dignity could not stand. "All ships target the lead human vessel," he ordered. "Full plasma barrage. Show them the price of defying the hegemony." The 3 Zephyrian cruisers turned their main weapons toward the Leviathan. Plasma cannons that could melt continents charged to full power. Energy beams that had shattered the defenses of 100 worlds focused on their target. Fire! Space erupted in brilliant light as concentrated plasma streams struck the human ship. Energy equivalent to stellar flares washed over the Leviathan's hull. The Admiral expected to see the primitive vessel break apart under the assault, its crew vaporized in the intense heat. Instead, the human ship's shields flared bright blue and absorbed the attack. When the plasma barrage ended, the Leviathan hung in space completely undamaged. "Impossible," Kethvara breathed. The human captain's voice came over the communications channel, still calm and professional. "Your turn." What happened next shattered everything Admiral Kethvara thought he knew about warfare. The human ships didn't just fight back, they fought with a fury and innovation that his tactical computers couldn't analyze or predict. Projectiles, launched from the Leviathan's hull at velocities that registered as significant fractions of light speed. Not energy beams or plasma bolts, but solid matter accelerated to impossible speeds. The kinetic weapons struck his flagship's shields with the force of antimatter explosions. The Titan and Goliath flanked his formation, their weapon systems firing in patterns that made no tactical sense, until he realized they were herding his ships into a killing ground. Point defense systems that should have been overwhelmed by the sheer number of incoming threats somehow intercepted everything while counterattacking with weapons he couldn't. "Identify shields at 60%, Thal shouted over the chaos. "Hull breaches on decks 7 through 12. They're using some kind of kinetic bombardment system, but the worst part wasn't the weapons. It was the way the humans fought. No formation flying, no predictable tactics. The 3 ships moved like they were dancing, covering each other's flanks while exploiting every weakness in Zephyrian battle doctrine." Admiral Kethvara watched his perfect conquest dissolve into nightmare, and realized that humanity had been planning this moment for far longer than he had imagined. The battle raged across Earth's orbital space with an intensity that defied every assumption about human capabilities. Captain Sarah Chen stood on the Leviathan's bridge, watching her weapons officers coordinate attacks that would have been impossible using traditional alien tactics. "Railgun batteries 7 through 12. Target the lead cruiser's weapon systems," she ordered. "Nuclear torpedo tubes. Prepare spread pattern Echo 7. The Leviathan's hull shuddered as massive railguns fired projectiles at 23% of light speed. The tungsten steel slugs, each weighing several tons, struck the Zephyrian flagship with the force of nuclear explosions. Unlike energy weapons, there was no warning, no charge-up time that allowed for defensive maneuvers. The projectiles simply appeared and devastated anything they touched. Admiral Kethvara's ship staggered under the impact, its elegant shields flickering as they tried to disperse kinetic energy that behaved nothing like the plasma weapons they were designed to counter. Hull plates buckled and atmosphere vented from dozens of breaches. "Commander Park, status on their formation?" Sarah called. "They're trying to reform into their standard battle pattern," Park responded, studying his tactical displays. "Same formation they used against the Vegan colonies 3 years ago." Sarah smiled grimly. 50 years of intercepted communications had given humanity detailed records of every Zephyrian battle. They knew the aliens' tactics better than the aliens themselves. "All ships, execute maneuver Delta 9, she commanded. The 3 human behemoths suddenly broke formation in what appeared to be chaotic retreat. The Titan peeled away toward Earth's poles while the Goliath accelerated toward the lunar orbit. Only the Leviathan remained in direct combat, seemingly abandoned by its escorts. Admiral Kethvara seized what looked like opportunity. All ships focus fire on the remaining human vessel. Destroy it before the others can return. The two undamaged Zephyrian cruisers converged on the Leviathan, their plasma cannons charging for a coordinated strike that should have overwhelmed even advanced shield systems. It was exactly the response that human strategists had predicted. The trap sprung with mechanical precision. As the alien ships moved to attack positions, the Goliath emerged from behind Luna at maximum acceleration, its weapons aimed at the Zephyrians' unshielded rear sections. Simultaneously, the Titan dove from above Earth's magnetosphere, using the planet's gravity well to achieve velocities that stressed even its advanced hull. Now, Sarah commanded. What followed was not a battle but a demonstration of human tactical evolution. The Leviathan's apparent retreat had been a feint, drawing the aliens into a three-dimensional crossfire that their rigid formation tactics couldn't counter. Railgun projectiles struck from three angles simultaneously, while nuclear torpedoes bracketed escape routes. But the humans' masterstroke came when they revealed their study of Zephyrian psychology. The Goliath suddenly erupted in a massive explosion, its hull breaking apart in spectacular fashion. Debris scattered across orbital space as the ship's reactor seemed to detonate. One enemy vessel destroyed, reported the alien sensor operator aboard Kethvara's flagship. The admiral allowed himself a moment of satisfaction, even as his own ship took devastating hits from the remaining human vessels. At least they had proven that these primitive ships could be destroyed. That satisfaction lasted exactly 12 seconds. The Goliath's wreckage suddenly realigned itself, revealing that the explosion had been an elaborate holographic deception. The real ship emerged from behind the debris field, completely undamaged and in perfect attack position. Its weapons locked onto the most damaged Zephyrian cruiser and fired a concentrated barrage that overwhelmed the alien vessel's failing shields. Impossible, Admiral Kethvara screamed as his escort exploded in brilliant fire. How did they generate such realistic sensor signatures? His question was answered by the appearance of new contacts throughout the local system. What had seemed like normal civilian traffic and communication satellites suddenly revealed themselves as military assets. Automated defense platforms shed their disguises and began launching missiles. Cargo haulers transformed into weapons platforms. Even scientific research stations joined the battle with surprisingly effective particle beam weapons. The humans hadn't just built warships. They had turned their entire system into a fortress hidden in plain sight. "Sir, we're receiving multiple targeting locks," reported Sub-Commander Thal, his voice tight with panic. "They have weapon systems throughout the system that we never detected." Captain Chen's voice came over the communication channel, still professionally calm despite the chaos of battle. "Admiral Kethvara, this is your final opportunity to surrender. Your fleet is surrounded and outgunned. Further resistance will only result in unnecessary casualties." The Admiral looked at his tactical display with growing horror. His perfect formation was in ruins, one cruiser destroyed, another heavily damaged, and his own flagship barely holding together under the coordinated human assault. Worse, the tactical analysis showed that the humans were barely using a fraction of their available firepower. They were holding back, he realized with dawning comprehension. This entire engagement has been a test. The revelation struck him with crushing force. The humans hadn't just defended themselves. They had been studying Zephyrian combat capabilities in real time, learning everything they needed to know about hegemony military doctrine. Every weapon fired, every tactical maneuver attempted, every defensive pattern deployed had been analyzed and cataloged by human computers. "Sir, hull breaches on decks 1 through 27, Thal reported. "Life support is failing in 40% of the ship. Weapon systems are operating at 22% efficiency." Around them, the battle continued to rage, but it was no longer a battle in any sense that Admiral Kethvara understood. The humans fought with an adaptability that seemed almost supernatural. When one tactic failed, they instantly shifted to another. When the aliens tried to exploit an apparent weakness, it proved to be a carefully prepared trap. The Leviathan demonstrated this principle by suddenly rotating its massive hull, bringing fresh weapon batteries to bear, while rotating damaged sections away from enemy fire. The ship's modular design allowed it to continue fighting effectively, even after taking damage that should have crippled it. They built their ships like living creatures, the Admiral realized. Redundant systems, adaptive responses, distributed control. We've been fighting an organism, not a machine. The final blow came when the humans revealed their electronic warfare capabilities. Suddenly, Zephyrian targeting systems began malfunctioning. Weapons fired at empty space while sensors reported contacts that didn't exist. Communication between the remaining alien ships dissolved into static and confusion. "Sir, they're jamming everything," Thal shouted. "We can't coordinate our remaining forces." Admiral Kethavara watched his centuries-old tactical doctrine crumble under human innovation. These primitives had studied hegemony warfare with obsessive detail, then developed countermeasures for every possible scenario. The battle was lost, had been lost from the moment his ships entered the system. "All ships cease fire," he ordered, his voice heavy with defeat. "Signal our surrender to the human fleet." The weapons fire slowly died away, leaving only the Leviathan's massive bulk hanging in space before his shattered formation. Captain Chen's image appeared on his main screen, her expression professional but implacable. "Admiral, you and your crews will be taken into custody. Your ships will be impounded pending negotiation of surrender terms." Kethavara nodded slowly, understanding finally dawning. "This was never about defending your world, was it?" Sarah Chen's smile was cold as vacuum. "No, Admiral. This was about sending a message to your empire. Earth is no longer a target. We're the predators now." As human boarding parties in powered armor began cutting through his ship's hulls, Admiral Kethavara realized that the galaxy's balance of power had just shifted forever. Admiral Kethavara sat in the detention cell aboard the Leviathan, staring at walls that seemed impossibly advanced for a primitive species. The containment field hummed with energy patterns that his instruments couldn't identify, and the guards outside wore armor that made them look like metal demons from his species' ancient myths. 3 days had passed since the battle ended. 3 days since everything he thought he knew about the galaxy had been proven wrong. The humans had treated him with professional courtesy, providing medical care for his injuries and decent quarters for his confinement. But they had also made it clear that he was no longer in control of his own fate. The cell door chimed, and Captain Sarah Chen entered. She looked tired but satisfied, carrying a datapad that probably contained his death warrant. The Admiral straightened, trying to maintain some dignity in defeat. "Captain," he said formally, "I assume you're here to discuss execution arrangements." Sarah pulled up a chair and sat down across from him, her expression thoughtful rather than hostile. "Actually, Admiral, I'm here to show you something. Something your empire needs to understand." She activated her datapad, and a holographic display filled the space between them. The image showed star charts spanning half the galaxy, with hundreds of systems marked in different colors. Red markers indicate worlds controlled by the Zephyrian hegemony, Sarah explained. Blue markers show species that have achieved independent spaceflight. Green markers represent worlds we've identified as being under threat of conquest. Kethavara studied the display with growing unease. The humans had intelligence on hundreds of systems, detailed information about hegemony fleet positions, and what appeared to be real-time updates on military movements throughout known space. "How?" he asked quietly. 50 years of preparation, Admiral. We've been intercepting your communications, tracking your ships, and studying your tactics since the first probe entered our system. We know more about your empire than most of your own officers." The display shifted, showing detailed schematics of Zephyrian ship designs, tactical manuals, and even personnel files of hegemony commanders. The scope of human intelligence gathering was staggering. "This is impossible," Kethavara protested. "A primitive species couldn't have developed such capabilities." Sarah's smile was cold but not unkind. "That's the problem with your empire, Admiral. You stopped learning. You conquered so many worlds using the same tactics that you forgot other species might be capable of innovation." The holographic display changed again, this time showing the recent battle from multiple angles. Kethavara watched his fleet's destruction with professional interest, noting tactical details he had missed during the chaos. "Your people are excellent warriors," Sarah admitted, "but you're predictable warriors. Every engagement follows the same pattern. Same formation, same weapons deployment, same psychological warfare techniques. It made planning our countermeasures relatively simple." The Admiral studied the tactical analysis with growing comprehension. The humans hadn't just defeated his fleet. They had dissected it with surgical precision, learning everything they needed to know about hegemony military capabilities. The battle recordings have been interesting to your enemies, Sarah continued conversationally. Species that your empire has oppressed for centuries are suddenly very curious about human military technology. She touched her datapad, and the display showed communication intercepts from across the galaxy. Dozens of species were transmitting requests for contact with Earth, offering alliances, sharing intelligence about hegemony weaknesses. You've started a revolution, Kethvara realized with dawning horror. We've offered hope, Sarah corrected. For the first time in centuries, oppressed species have seen proof that the hegemony can be defeated, that their ships can be destroyed, their tactics countered, their empire challenged. The display showed real-time reports from hegemony-controlled worlds. Rebellions were erupting across the galaxy as subjugated species rose up against their oppressors. Colonial governors were requesting emergency reinforcements. Entire systems were declaring independence. The Vegan system declared independence 6 hours ago, Sarah noted, highlighting one particular system. The Altarians followed suit 4 hours later. Your fleet stationed at Rigel is currently under siege by a coalition of 3 species you conquered in the last decade. Admiral Kethvara felt the foundations of his worldview crumbling. The hegemony had seemed invincible, its dominance assured by technological superiority and military precision. Now that carefully constructed empire was falling apart because one primitive world had refused to submit. What do you want from me? He asked finally. Sarah leaned forward, her expression serious. We want you to carry a message back to your leaders. Earth is no longer a target for conquest. We're offering protection to any species threatened by hegemony expansion, and we're prepared to take the fight to your home systems if necessary. The threat was delivered calmly, but its implications were staggering. These humans were talking about invading the heart of the galaxy's most powerful empire. You can't be serious, Kethvara protested. 3 ships against the entire hegemony fleet? You may have surprised us once, but we have thousands of vessels, entire armadas stationed throughout the galaxy. Sarah's smile was patient but implacable. Admiral, what you fought here were our training vessels. The first ships we built while we were still learning to adapt your technology. Our current fleet is significantly more advanced. She touched her datapad again, and the display showed construction facilities throughout the Sol system, massive shipyards hidden in asteroid fields, production centers on distant moons, entire fleets of vessels that made the Behemoth-class ships look primitive by comparison. We've been busy, Sarah said simply. The Admiral stared at the images with growing despair. Hundreds of ships, each larger and more advanced than the vessels that had destroyed his fleet. Humanity hadn't just built a defense force, they had constructed an invasion armada. But our real advantage isn't our ships, Sarah continued. It's our approach to warfare. You fight the same way your ancestors did 1,000 years ago. We adapt, improvise, and innovate with every engagement. By the time your empire develops countermeasures for our current tactics, we'll have moved on to something completely different. She stood up, preparing to leave. You have a choice, Admiral. You can return to your leaders with our message and try to negotiate a peaceful resolution, or you can refuse and we'll deliver the message ourselves. Kethvara looked up at her, seeing not just a primitive human but a representative of something genuinely terrifying. A species that had turned warfare into an art form. What kind of peaceful resolution? Complete withdrawal from all conquered territories. Reparations for subjugated species. Dismantling of your military infrastructure. In exchange, we won't hunt your fleets to extinction. The terms were harsh but not unreasonable given the circumstances. The alternative, however, was clearly much worse. And if I refuse to carry this message? Sarah's expression hardened. Then in 6 months, human fleets will begin appearing in your home systems. We'll start by liberating your most recent conquests and work our way toward the core worlds. Your people can surrender gracefully now, or they can be conquered by the primitives they underestimated. As she reached the door, Sarah turned back one final time. Oh, and Admiral? The recordings of your fleet's destruction are being broadcast throughout the galaxy. Every species knows that the hegemony can be beaten. Even if you somehow managed to defeat us, you'd still face rebellions on hundreds of worlds. The door sealed behind her, leaving Kethvara alone with the holographic display still showing humanity's growing war machine. For the first time in his long military career, the Admiral felt genuine fear, not for himself, but for the empire he had served so loyally. Outside his cell, Humanity prepared for war on a galactic scale, and the balance of power shifted toward a small blue world that had refused to surrender. The age of human expansion was about to begin, and nothing in the galaxy would ever be the same.